Good morning, boys and girls. Can you believe it? It's our last week of school. But we are going to continue with our story in the Bible with the Israelites and Moses, just because I think it's so important, and we can finish up and get them into Canaan by Thursday. So today we're going to start with the story titled The Ten Commandments. Now, when we left off on Friday, our friends, the Israelites, were being led out of Egypt by Moses. Pharaoh finally let them go. After 400 years in Egypt, the Israelites were finally free. Can you imagine how that would feel? It wasn't easy. Immediately they ran into trouble, and immediately God showed up to help. The Red Sea was in the way of their escape, so God pushed the water aside, and they walked right through. They had no food to eat, so God sent birds for meat and weird flaky stuff called manna for bread. They had no water to drink, so God told Moses to hit a rock with his walking stick, and boom, a fountain of water came right out of the rock. But even though God was with them, giving them everything they needed, the children of Israel still complained. Can you imagine that, boys and girls? It's too hot. We're thirsty. We're tired of eating this weird flaky stuff. Where was this new land? Why did they have to be in the desert? How long would they have to keep walking? God wanted more than just to get them to the land he had promised. He wanted to make them a nation whose king was God himself. The Israelites needed more than just directions for where to go. They needed directions for how to live. They needed to understand how to be a nation ruled by God. You see, even though they were the children of Israel, they still sinned. Sometimes they were mean. Sometimes they would put themselves first. And remember, people who sin can't be close to God. So how could sinful people live with God as their king? It was going to be hard. It was going to take work. It was going to take rules. Lots and lots of rules. God led Moses up a mountain called Mount Sinai so they could talk about these rules. And he started out by giving Moses 10 really important ones, so important that he carved them into big stone tablets. They were so important that they have their own name, the 10 Commandments. There he is up on the mountain. And boys and girls, if you remember, Mrs. Wink and I would sing the 10 Commandments song a lot because we both did them for our foundations course. All right, back to the book. Here are the 10 Commandments. You must not have any gods except me. This was a big one. Egypt had lots of pretend gods, and some of the Israelites had started worshiping these gods instead of the true God. God made it clear that he was the only God they should bow down to. Do not make any idols. In the ancient world, an idol was usually a small statue that stood for a god. People would pray to and give offerings to these statues. None of that, God said. Be careful how you use my name. God's name deserves respect. The Israelites were to use God's name seriously and only when they were talking about him. Remember the Sabbath day. God wanted the Israelites to take one day each week and give that day to him as a reminder that everything they had was from God. Honor your father and mother. Respect your mom and dad. Listen to them and take care of them when they're old and can't take care of themselves. This makes God very happy. Do not murder anyone. There was a lot of murder in the ancient world, but God didn't want murder in his nation. Do not be guilty of adultery. Adultery is when you take someone else's wife or husband and act like they're your wife or husband. It's sort of like stealing, and it breaks up families, which are very important to God. Do not steal. Speaking of stealing, do not take things that don't belong to you. Do not tell lies. Be honest. Don't try to get yourself out of trouble or get other people into trouble by saying things that aren't true. Do not covet. Covet means to want to take. If you covet someone's bike, it means you want to take his bike. God says to be happy with what you have. Don't desire to take the things that other people have. 10 big rules carved into stone. But was that everything that the Israelites needed to do to live with God as their king? Not even close. Moses was about to learn that the 10 Commandments weren't the end of God's rules for Israel. They were just the beginning. And there they are on the stone tablets. Now, our everyday truth today, boys and girls, is God's guidance shows me where to go. God's guidelines show me how to live, which I think we've learned a lot this year about what we can find in the Bible and how God has all of our instructions right here for what we need to know and how we need to act. Why was it important for God's people to have rules? Well, boys and girls, just why it's important for us to have rules. Even moms and dads and big people have rules, and you do too, just like we have rules in school. No running on the steps, holding the handrail. It's to keep you safe. And all of God's rules that he gives us is to keep us safe and to honor him. If directions tell you where to go, what do rules tell you? That's a very good question, because I think sometimes directions and rules are kind of the same, whereas maybe directions are more implied and rules are rules. So we're going to bow our heads and close our eyes and say a quick prayer before we close out our time together. Dear God, thank you for giving us guidelines for how to live in a way that honors you. Amen. I will see you guys tomorrow.